On Press Perspective today, we touch upon South Korea's slight rebound in the number of newborns and the lessons that can be learned. Do stay with us. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Friday, April 10th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Today we talk about a number of stories on the social front related to South Korea, ranging from fertility rates to the debate over hanja and Hangeul to the use of AI in daily life. For more on this, our freelance journalist Yang Chien-Hao from Taiwan here in South Korea. Of course, Chien-Hao, welcome back.
Hello, it's nice to be back after such a long time from a vacation. Just come back here last week.
Right, great to have you here.
Thank you.
I also have writer Colin Marshall with us. Colin, it's great to have you here in the studio.
Looking forward to talking about it all.
Right, Chien-Hao, we start with you. Let's begin with news that concerns both your country, Taiwan, and of course South Korea.
Yes.
Now, Taiwan's total fertility rate, it has fallen to the lowest worldwide, which actually was a title that South Korea held for quite a while. Tell us more about the Taiwan situation.
In fact, Taiwan and South Korea have spent the past decade competing for an unfortunate title, which country has the lowest fertility rate in the world. And at first, this issue did not receive much attention in South Korea. That is largely because Korean media and academia typically rely those figures or data from OECD member countries when making international comparisons, but Taiwan is not a member of OECD. However, that has begun to change recently. It has become different due to Taiwan's strong economic performance with its GDP per capita income once again surpassing South Korea, and it has drawn greater attention from the South Korean media. Many Koreans visiting Taiwan often describe Taiwan as a relaxed, comfortable and highly livable with low stress. That has led to a natural question: how can such a appealing island have an even lower fertility rate than South Korea? If we take a look at the total fertility rate, we usually say that it needs to be at least 2.1 in order for a country to avoid such population crisis. And South Korea hit a record low of 0.72 in 2023, while Taiwan stood at 0.87 in the same year. But starting the following year, the trends diverged, and South Korea's rate has rebounded for 2 consecutive years, while Taiwan has continued to decline. The latest annual figures of 2025 shows that Taiwan at 0.7, indeed is 0.68, and South Korea at 0.8. And just 2 days ago, a Taiwanese cabinet minister even called me to ask me about the situation in South Korea. I explained it that in 2023, the year of dragon contributed to a temporary increase in births in South Korea. And in addition, during the pandemic from 2020 to 2022, the social distancing measures reduced the social interactions. And in the years after the pandemic, delayed or suspended social activities resumed, and leading to an increase in marriages and childbirth. Taiwan, however, we were far less affected by the pandemic. In fact, there were even a period of around 200 days that we don't have confirmed positive cases. So the daily life remained largely uninterrupted. Ironically, after the pandemic during the year of dragon, Taiwan did not see a similar rebound in births. Instead, the number of newborns continued to decline, which has become a major concern for the government. According to Taiwan's most authoritative research institution, Academia Sinica, One of the main causes of low fertility rate is late marriage and no marriage. In surveys conducted over 2 consecutive years, over 10,000 people aged from 20 to 49 years old, about 2/3 of the Taiwanese, both men and women, reported that they do not have a stable romantic or dating partner. And Taiwanese society also has a strong tendency toward individualism, with less emphasis on collective or family life. And on top of that, the cost of raising children is extremely high. Traditionally, in Chinese culture, children were always being seen as a form of security in old age, in retired life for the elders. Today in Taiwan, however, many people feel that having children could become a burden. And now low birth rates and rapid aging has already caused real serious problem in the society. Taiwan is now facing labor shortages. Over the past 30 years, our country has imported a large numbers of laborers from Philippines and Indonesia, mainly to provide the elder care. And now, since this week, the government is also discussing and planning to bring workers from India to fill the labor gaps for the traditional industries.
Right, the shrinking workforce there in Taiwan. Colin, as Chien-Hao mentioned, South Korea's total fertility rate, it has been marking a slight yet tangible rebound in recent times. What do you believe is behind this rebound?
Yes, the latest I've seen is that we now have solid stats for, I think, a year and a half of month-on-month rise, and it could be more, because that only goes up to January. So potentially it's still happening, and it's a gradual rise. It's been coming up slowly, bit by bit, but upward is upward, at least it's not downward. And then there are many different explanations being put out there for this. Of course, the government, I think there are certain departments that could be quick to want to take credit for it, given how much money has been spent on incentives for marriage and family formation, childbirth. It's, of course, hard to judge right now, but we can, in a way, look at this in a sort of inverse manner. Look at the 60s, 70s, and 80s in Korea, when the government was going pretty all out on reducing the birth rate at that time. The idea being there was a slogan rolled out, which translates to essentially have 2 kids and raise them right, later revised to have 1 kid and raise them right. And so there was a lot of different forms of, not quite coercion, but you could get an access to a home loan much more easily if you underwent procedures so you would not have more kids, for example. So it had clearly, by the end of the 80s, succeeded too well, those programs. And so we got into the situation here in Korea that we have been in these past sort of 10, 15 years. That's not the only factor, but you can see how policy has it can have a delayed effect sometimes, and maybe too much of an effect. Now, could we have the same problem? Could Korea be overpopulated again soon? I don't think that's a danger, but I do think there are other reasons involved that you can see what's going on when, for example, you look at the population distribution, and there's a bump of population in their 30s now. And they're the echo of a previous baby boom in Korea, much like my generation in the US is an echo of the post-war baby boom there. Here it's more the sort of 1960s born parents. Their kids are getting into their 30s, and more to the point that the women are getting into their 30s, which is always highlighted in these articles. And they're thinking it's probably time to do this if we're going to do it now or never. So you see that happening as well. But there is a theme that's come up in many conversations I've had about this, the birth rate and the sort of bounce back it's having now, if indeed it is a bounce back, that if any country can come back from this kind of spiral, it's probably South Korea, because it's shown in so many different ways how sharply it can turn. I mean, this is a country that in many ways turns on a dime. Look at how trends work here, People can change their minds all of a sudden. Even look at how people have all moved into apartment buildings in the past sort of 50, 60 years. So if any society can change quickly, it's this one. Whether that's enough to get back on track to keep the population stable, I'm not sure, but it's much more likely than in larger countries also having some of the same problems. In a way, Korea has been a sort of canary in the coal mine for not just birth rate troubles, but also, and we'll talk about it later, technology adoption. For better or for worse, Korea's on trend early. And maybe sometimes gets the solutions early too, if there are solutions.
Right, indeed. Colin, let's now move on to another issue of national interest. Gwanghwamun, it's back on the local headlines, and this time amid a debate over its name board as the main gate of Gyeongbokgung Palace. The name board is currently in hanja. There is debate about including a name board also in Hangeul.
Right.
Give us a little bit of context.
Yes, people who visit Korea have probably visited Gyeongbokgung, the central palace in Seoul and the major palace of the Joseon dynasty, 500 years long and seen in many ways as the predecessor to modern Korean society. Now, the first version of Gyeongbokgung was built in the very late 14th century, before the invention of Hangeul, about 50 years before. So it's natural that the sign would be in hanja, Chinese characters, which is what it's the only written script anybody had to use before Hangeul was invented in the mid-15th century. And even well after, classical Chinese remained the language of the elite, with Hangeul being a sort of lesser form of written communication for a long time. Now, of course, almost everything is Hangeul in Korea. If you know only Hangeul, no classical Chinese, you'll be fine. Of course, students do study it, but it's more of a legacy presence in Korea. And so this debate is about historical accuracy versus national identity. And Gyeongbokgung has been a site of this for quite a while, because during the Japanese colonial period, the Japanese government general building sort of sat over it. It was mostly dismantled, and on the site of the bulk of Gyeongbokgung was this big building run by the Japanese who had colonized the country. It was their headquarters in many ways. And so that was torn down in the 90s. Only 30 or so years ago did that happen. And the debate ever since, or the project ever since, has been to restore Gyeongbokgung to historical accuracy. Well, okay. There's accuracy, and then there's sort of knowing what accuracy even is. When the palace had been destroyed multiple times, it changed, it evolved, it was built out through the centuries. When is the point you want to reconstruct? How do you want to do it? Do we have the records? Do we know enough to reconstruct? There's no blueprints for a lot of these eras. You have to make educated guesses, and it goes right up to the sign up front in Gwanghwamun, the main gate, where everybody enters through, tourists and otherwise. You look at it right now, it actually says Mun Hwa Gwang, because it goes in the order. It was read the other way around in those days. But the idea among certain groups protesting this is that this isn't Korean. This is a different language that was, in a sense, imposed upon Korea. And if it was in Hangeul, the Korean alphabet, a source of pride in Korea, it would better convey an image of Korea to especially the outsider visitors, the foreign visitors who come. But, I think the solutions are unsatisfactory. Some have been proposed to put a Hangeul sign below the hanja as if it were a subtitle. There has been a history. It has been in Korean script in Hangeul before. In the late 60s, President Park Chung-hee painted a sign himself, put that up. This was seen as historically inaccurate, as was the concrete material used to build the gate itself, to rebuild it. So these squabbles will go on and on and on. But I think if you're going for historical accuracy, Chinese characters are more historically accurate. That's what would have been used for the sign. Hangeul is more, it's a source of national pride, and it's perhaps the image you want to project, but it's not about historical accuracy at that point.
And Chien-Hao, I'm curious about your thoughts. What do you think with regard to this ongoing national debate as a foreigner looking in at the situation?
To be honest, I might not be the proper or objective person to be asked, because I use Chinese characters. We read them, we type them, we write them every day. So naturally, of course, I tend to hope that more Chinese characters, more hanjas will be used in South Korea. And when we look at those South Korean newspapers from before the 90s, they are actually quite easy for us to read, because all of them are mostly full of hanja, full of Chinese characters. So it allows us to grasp the meaning very quickly. And people in South Korea, those people in their 40s or 50s who received education in hanja can still distinguish between those words with same pronunciation but different meanings by writing out the corresponding Chinese characters. But about about 30 years ago, when Taiwanese traveled to South Korea or for South Korean visited Taiwan, even if they don't share the common spoken language, they could still have some, achieve some basic level of communication or dialogue by writing Chinese characters. But for younger generations here, today, Chinese characters, hanja, make them feel quite unfamiliar, and for most of the people, even including Mandarin speakers like us, Chinese characters are really, really complicated and difficult to learn. While it's true that a significant portion of Korean vocabulary is derived from the hanja, from the Chinese characters, the idea of promoting hanja to improve reading or comprehension might sound reasonable in theory. Like recently, we can see like many people are saying that we need to learn more hanja to improve our ability to read. But in practice, it could be more trouble than it's worth. Coming back to the issue of Guang Huamen's name board, it was originally written in Chinese characters, indeed, and if it were unchanged to Hangul, if it were changed to Hangul, to the Korean alphabets, more Koreans would be able to read it easily and might even feel more comfortable, or just like Colin mentioned, they would have like national pride. Or however, doing so could risk erasing part of its historical significance. It might even lead some people to mistakenly believe that the gate itself was originally inscribed in Hangul. So ultimately, it depends on the perspective from which the issue is viewed.
Right, of course. And while that debate goes on, Colin, there are new findings here in the country that show on average, the ordinary Korean uses AI 2 hours each day. What's your experience with AI on a daily basis? I have to admit, my own experience, though, it's not that high. I think I spend about 10 minutes, maybe.
It's not bad, yes. I'm not surprised to see that figure, because I also saw another figure recently that Koreans watch the most AI-generated video content of any country in the world. And that too wasn't that surprising when I really thought about it, especially if you see what people have on their phones on the Seoul subway. But this AI video content, there's a very evocative word you see used in the English language world, slop. AI slop, meaning, well, it's like what pigs eat. You just throw all the garbage together and then here, eat it, enjoy. And AI slop, it refers to this idea, the sense that it's nothing, no work is going into these videos. People sort of type a few things up and just spit out a video, or the computer spits it out and you post it and hope people like it. And it's a very low effort form of content production. But in fact, it seems popular. Not all of it, but there is enough of this AI generated video that really does go viral, especially here in Korea. You know, you'd see zoo animals dancing the Gangnam style dance, I don't know, or there's a big genre of videos where people, not people, they're just images of a hand with a knife cutting through fruit made of glass, but it just, I don't know what, I guess they're kind of interesting the first time, but they're just images and videos and sort of sensory experiences I suppose you couldn't have in the pre-AI world. There's something interesting about it, but also this shows you something I was referring to earlier, which is the canary in the coal mine quality of South Korea. As I say, it shows up, it manifests in technology adoption as well. We saw it with smartphones, you know. In the US, young people got smartphones, older people took their time. Here, grandma was in line to get the latest Samsung Galaxy, not without exception, but much more so than the US. And I'm not surprised, as I say, about any of this, but it gives you a little pause, like, you know, do we need to all jump into this at once? What's going to happen as a result? And I fear I'm going to wake up one morning and I'll be surrounded by 50 million people all in advanced AI psychosis because of all the slop content they've been consuming or whatever it might be. But again, I think that as with the birth rate, Koreans will plunge into something and they can probably find their way out en masse, more so than, say, Americans. So I'm not entirely pessimistic about it, but it is a bit disheartening to see just how much of this stuff Koreans watch on a daily basis, I will say.
Right. For now, also, Chien-Hao, South Korea is aiming to advance AI literacy among its public to ensure a broad, productive use of AI. How does this compare to the efforts of other countries?
I have to say South Korea is really ahead of the curve in this area, in the whole, like, Asia or even around the world with its advanced digital infrastructure and strong backing from major chaebols, the South Korean government moved very early to promote AI literacy among the public. There has been a clear push to ensure the basic skills to use AI for people, while also leveraging these technologies to help address regional imbalances between the urban and rural area. When it comes to AI, meanwhile, I want to be a bit critical at the moment because, yeah, AI is incredibly convenient. It saves time and allows us to focus on more meaningful work. I use it every day myself, but I believe it's crucial for the general public to understand its limitation rather than assuming that AI can solve every problem. Over the past 1 or 2 years, I've increasingly noticed that a concerning trend that since the rise of AI, many people have become overly reliant on it and even complacent and become very lazy. For example, in high school and university, it is now very common for students to use AI to write reports or create presentations. More recently in Taiwan, even some journalists and writers and influencers, they have begun using AI to produce fully content articles, even without revising. The problem is that their work often carries a very noticeable AI tone. You can just notice that. And lacks original perspective themselves. When challenged with follow-up questions or different opinions, they often struggle to respond, revealing a lack of genuine understanding. More broadly, many people now rely on AI to feed them information, and as a result, they are losing the ability to conduct their own research or grasp the full context of an issue. That, in my view, is something we should be cautious about. And AI undoubtedly brings convenience, but it can also be addictive in a way, drawing people in a way very deeply that they risk losing their own voices and critical thinking ability.
Right, for sure, which is why probably a more cautious approach to AI might be better for now. I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. Chien-Hao, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Colin, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you, Sunny.
Right, on that note, we end this week's editions of Press Perspective. We return same time next Monday for a session on the latest events surrounding the conflict in the Middle East. Do join us then.